Okay, folks. So I wanted to have a continuation of the initial video notes for this week. I needed to kind of finish the thoughts for what's happening with these variables when we're passing these to subprograms. Now, first and foremost, it's important to note that from this point forward, we're going to be working with a main program and subprograms rather than a main module and submodules. Now, if you recall, in past video notes, those that main module and the submodules were all part of the same program. Now, we're kind of leaning toward the idea of a modular program where you have program segments that can be used in other programs. So it's important to note when we're doing that, when we use variables in some of those subprograms, that those have to be passed properly. And we're going to cover that here in just a moment. Now, this concept is covered in a little more detail in a future video note, but I need to kind of finish the thought for this week's video notes, because you guys are going to probably need something like this in as the assignment 3 to complete the assignment 3. So there are two ways to pass variables from the main program to the subprograms. You can either pass them by value or pass them by reference. And if you pass them by value, you're simply making a copy of the original memory location and creating a new memory location. It has the same data type and the same value and all that. It's just making a copy of it. Now, if you pass by reference, all that it's doing is creating a new label for the original memory location. So you're not creating a new memory location, you're not modifying the value that's in the original memory location, you're simply giving it a new variable name or a new label to the very same memory location. So let's take a look real quick how that works. So again, we have the main program rather than main module. We no longer have main modules or submodules or anything like that. We declare an integer value named my number. And of course, like I said, that grabs a piece of memory, sets that to the integer data type, and at the next line, we put a value of 10 with that set statement. That puts a value of 10 in that memory location with the current variable name or label called my number. And then we output to the display variable value for my number in the main program is, and then it has the variable my number. So down here you'll see that that it prints that out. Variable value for my number in the main program is 10. All right, so we then call a subprogram called do not modify. And again, like I said, this is we have open and close parentheses after all of these, and we're going to be sending a parameter to that subprogram, and when it lands down here in the subprogram called do not modify, the contents of these parentheses are called arguments. We'll get into that a little bit later on in future video notes, but in any event, so you'll notice that it's declaring itself as an integer again. Now, you'll recall that this was declared originally as an integer, so when it lands down here, it's got to be an integer. So you don't have to use that data type, but it helps you out later on to remember what data type you're working with. So inside the subprogram, we declare a new variable called your number as an integer, and we set a value to your number to 3. And then we have another set statement that sets my number is equal to my number times your number. Now you'll notice up here that when we call this subprogram, this variable is being passed by value, which means that it's creating a new memory location and is totally separate from the original memory location up here for this variable. So we have this variable in the subprogram called my number, and then we set my number to my number, which is currently 10, times your number, which is 3, and the product of that is 30, which goes into that new memory location called my number. And we output to the display variable value for my number in do not modify subprogram is the contents of that memory location, which is 30. So you look down here, that's precisely what we do. Variable value for my number in do not modify subprogram is 30. So then we go back up to the main module, and the next line says it outputs to display again with the write command. Variable value for my number in the main program is, and then the contents of my number. Now, if you recall, since we passed this value by reference, it did not modify the original variable value, which is still 10. So when it outputs that display, it's going to still output variable value for my number in this main program is 10. All right, so then we go to the next line, which is called do modify, and it passes that variable again called my number. And notice down here, when it gets to this subprogram called do modify, it identifies that incoming variable as an integer, and again it's called my number. And notice that this is being passed as a reference because we has as ref after the variable name. So what that means is that you now have a new label that points back to the same memory location. Now you can actually call this variable name anything that you want, and same thing up here. You can call it anything that you want, but just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to keep that with the same label. So you effectively have two variable names that are the same name, pointing to the same memory location. So again, we declare a variable called your number and declare that as an integer. And now notice that that when we declare the variable up here, I think I've mentioned this in a past set of video notes. When you declare a variable in a subprogram or a submodule, that variable is only in existence for the duration of that subprogram. So when you leave this, when it completes this process and goes back to the main program, that memory is gone. It frees up the memory location. The variable name is gone. So down in this subprogram, we create a variable called your number, and it's as if that value never existed. And we set the value of that variable to a value of 5. So then the next statement is a set statement to set my number is equal to my number times your number. Now again, the value of my number is 10 because it's pointing to the same memory location that was identified up here in main. So this was 10, and your number is 5. So so set my number equals my number times your number is 5 times 10. So it's going to set a value of 50 in this memory location. So this next line will write out variable value for my number in do modify subprogram is the contents of my number is 50. So it's going to print that out at this location to display variable value for my number in do modify subprogram is 50. And it's going to go back up here to the top, and the next line is going to be the write statement. Variable value for my number in the main program is the contents of my number. And now notice that this display to the output is going to be variable value for my number in the main program is 50, because since we passed this by reference and modified the original value, it modified that value that was originally declared in main. So that pretty much finishes up how those variables are passed. And just remember that that these are passed either by reference or by value. So keep that in mind as you start to write your assignment 3 program, and there's going to be more to come.